At 2:58 p.m., I stood in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting the collar on my favorite navy blouse, staring at my own reflection like it might give me a pep talk. 10 years. Folks, 10 damn years of being the invisible glue holding Whispering Pines together. I'd organized every 4th of July barbecue, smoothed over neighbor feuds about mailbox colors, even convinced the landscaping crew to drop their rates by 15% because I knew how to talk numbers without sounding like I was begging. This afternoon was supposed to be my moment. The HOA board was voting on the new community liaison position, the one role that actually meant something around here. My name had been on the short list for months. Neighbors had stopped me at the mailbox whispering, "You've earned this." Mara, even the old guy on Elm Street who never smiles, had given me a thumbs up last week. I rehearsed my thank you speech in my head the whole drive over, keeping it short, humble, no gloating, just gratitude and a promise to keep the neighborhood actually livable instead of a police state run by tape measures. I stepped into the community center at 3:02 exactly, heels clicking on the cheap linoleum like a countdown. Karen Hargrove didn't stand. She just pointed at the folding chair across from her with one manicured finger, still pretending to read something on her iPad like I was an afterthought. I'd seen that move before, usually right before she slapped a $250 fine on someone for non-compliant holiday lights. My stomach tightened. She finally looked up and smiled. Not the warm, neighborly kind. No, this was the smile of a woman who'd just spotted a spider in her shower and decided to watch it drown. "This won't take long," she said, voice syrupy sweet like the artificial sweetener she probably put in her morning kale smoothie. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table with one finger, the way people do when they're enjoying the drama. "Board review update," she announced, all the warmth of a robocall. "After careful consideration of community priorities, we've decided to cancel the current liaison appointment pipeline for this quarter, including yours." The room went silent except for the hum of the crappy AC. My name was typed right there in black and white like a parking ticket from hell. No explanation. "No, we appreciate your service. Just not a good fit for leadership at this time." I stared at that paper and felt something snap behind my ribs. Not tears. Something colder. Older. Like every time I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. rewriting the pool maintenance contract so Karen could take credit at the annual meeting. Like every time I talked a vendor out of quitting after she screamed at them about unauthorized dandelion tolerance. And now here she was cutting me loose like I was yesterday's grass clippings. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even ask why. I stood up, nodded once, and walked out. My heels echoed down the hallway like gunshots in a quiet suburb. That walk to my car felt endless, but not because of the stares from the other board members peeking through the blinds. It was the calm. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't raging on a neighborhood Facebook group. I was already planning. By the time I hit the freeway, I had my mental checklist. Update the vendor contacts. Text the core volunteers. Pull every contract I'd personally negotiated over the last decade. Karen had just made the biggest mistake of her petty little reign. The sun was still blazing when I pulled into my driveway. Funny how getting blindsided on a Friday afternoon doesn't sting quite the same when the air smells like fresh-cut lawns and weekend freedom. I should have been crushed. Should have been calling my sister to vent. Instead, I felt crystal clear. They didn't want me as liaison. Fine. I'd take the whole damn neighborhood infrastructure with me, clause by clause. That night, I didn't drink wine or ugly cry into a pillow. I sat at my kitchen table, still wearing the blouse I'd picked for my promotion, laptop open, rewriting my entire 10-year volunteer resume into 6 bullet points that screamed competence. The only thing that had ever grown under Karen's leadership was her collection of ridiculous violation notices. 97% of people watching these HOA Karen stories right now haven't hit subscribe yet. If you're already feeling that delicious, slow burn rage building, smash that like button and subscribe. Trust me, it only gets better or worse, depending on whether you're Team Karen or Team Justice. Back to it. I had 3 missed calls by 9 p.m. From my core volunteers: Lisa, who ran the book club like a military operation; Mike, who could sweet-talk any contractor into free mulch; and quiet Sarah, who kept the pool schedule flawless. I didn't answer yet. Instead, I opened an email I'd left unread for 4 months. Subject: quick chat about future opportunities. Fully confidential. It was from the regional director of Greenscape Landscaping, the company I brought in 3 years ago after Karen's previous vendor walked over a dispute about improper edging. I replied with 2 words: still interested. Meeting booked for Saturday morning before Karen could even finish her Saturday power walk patrol. Saturday at 10 a.m. Sharp, we met at the little cafe by the park that smells like cinnamon rolls and quiet revenge. No small talk. The director slid a folder across the table. New community-wide landscaping agreement. Full autonomy for the liaison. 42% better rates than what Karen was paying, and the same ironclad continuity clause I'd written myself. Can I bring my people? I asked. He didn't blink. Bring the loyalty, we'll bring the mowers. I signed before my coffee cooled. Not for revenge. For the simple fact that they saw me as the person who actually kept this neighborhood from turning into a weed-choked dictatorship. I walked out without posting a single cryptic meme on the neighborhood app. Just texted Lisa, Mike, and Sarah, coffee tomorrow? We met at our usual booth at Lenny's Diner, where the pancakes are too big and the waitress minds her business. I didn't rant. I just looked at them, calm as a summer evening, and said, I start Monday. Lisa blinked. Mike leaned back like he'd been waiting for that line since the last $300 fine for his non-regulation birdbath. They didn't ask where. They knew me. They knew how quiet I got when I was dangerous. They nodded. Lisa tapped her coffee mug like a toast. And just like that, I had the start of something bigger than a title. I had momentum. And Karen? She had no clue she just cut the wrong wire on a neighborhood ready to explode. Monday morning, I woke up to the sound of my own phone buzzing with resignation texts from my volunteers. Lisa's was first, clean, polite, no drama, effective immediately. Mike's followed 4 minutes later. Same format. By 10:42 a.m., the Whispering Pines HOA group chat was already lighting up with confused emojis. Wait, who's handling the landscaping bids now? Is Mara still our point person on the pool contract? These weren't innocent questions. They were the first cracks in Karen's perfect little empire. Across town at the HOA office, Karen was probably sipping her oat milk latte and congratulating herself on streamlining leadership. She had no idea the dominoes had already started falling. Greenscape's regional director emailed me at 11:17 a.m. Noticed some inconsistencies in assigned contacts. Confirming you're no longer associated with Whispering Pines HO. I read it twice. Then forwarded it straight to my new legal contact at the vendor without a single word of commentary. The reply came back in 15 minutes. We'll review the original agreement. That's the beautiful thing about contracts. Once trust walks out the door, it doesn't knock twice. By Wednesday, the whisper chain was humming louder than the cicadas in July. Neighbors were asking each other in hushed tones at the mailbox. Hey, just checking. Who's our liaison on the new security contract? I heard Mara took some time to upskill. Karen tried to spin it in the weekly newsletter. Short-term leadership recalibration for greater efficiency. Efficiency. That woman really thought she could patch a Mara-shaped hole with a $9.99 Canva template and a pizza party. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new rhythm like I'd never left the driver's seat. My volunteers were already onboarding 2 smaller neighborhood associations that had been begging for better rates. We were prepping a pitch for the big gated community down the road that could eat up half the HOA's annual budget in one swing. Momentum felt surgical. Clean. Back at Whispering Pines, the panic was starting to smell like cheap perfume and desperation. Thursday, I got a text from an old neighbor who never gossips unless the sky is actually falling. Karen's already panicking. She told the pool committee, "You were just taking some personal time." Personal time. That woman really believed she could replace 10 years of relationship building with a spreadsheet and a strongly worded email. By Monday of week 2, 6 more volunteers had quietly stepped down. 3 were the ones I'd mentored personally on vendor negotiations. 2 had handled the 4th of July fireworks permit that Karen always took credit for. The 6th was just a quiet retiree who apparently wasn't willing to risk being part of a sinking ship. Lisa texted me a screenshot of the volunteer sign-up sheet. Empty. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Then it landed. The email from Greenscape at 4:26 p.m. Subject: Renewal Clarification. Short: Clinical. Hi Mara. Reviewing documents and noticed inconsistencies in assigned contacts. Just confirming you're no longer the designated liaison? If so, please advise you should handle the upcoming review. Translation: We signed because of you. If you're gone, this whole thing is up in the air. I forwarded it straight to legal. 15 minutes later, the reply: We'll handle the original clause. I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and let it settle. Trust. Once it leaves the building, doesn't come back begging. The clause itself had lived in those contracts for years, tucked away like a loaded spring. Key community liaison continuity. It read in plain English I'd written myself after Karen's last vendor walked over a screaming match about unauthorized pet way signage. If the designated liaison is involuntarily removed, the agreement is null unless renegotiated in writing with the client. My name, Mara Ellison, sat right there in black and white beneath a section nobody else ever bothered to read. It wasn't flashy. It was protection. Greenscape, Aquapure Pools, and SecureGuard Security had all come on board during absolute chaos. Previous vendors had left the neighborhood scorched with half-finished projects and surprise rate hikes. I calmed them, rebuilt trust, answered 2 a.m. texts about broken sprinklers. So when we signed, I made the ask quietly. They didn't blink. Makes sense. Added. Now, over iced tea on my patio. My new legal contact was holding that clause like she'd just found a live grenade in the HOA bylaws. They're screwed, she said flatly. They submitted the renewal packet with someone else's signature. Junior board member who barely knows how to schedule a mowing rotation. I took the printout, reread it like a eulogy, and nodded. Want to send a formal reply? I didn't speak. I just forwarded the client's escalation email, attached the original PDF with the continuity clause highlighted in yellow, and hit send with 0 commentary. 20 minutes later, the reply: Understood. We'll be terminating per clause. Thanks for the clarity. Aquapure was next, almost identical. SecureGuard followed within hours. The ripple hit the HOA office like a lawnmower blade to the foot. I knew because a former board member who still had a conscience texted me one line. Did you just nuke $87,000 in annual contracts with 3 PDFs? I didn't reply. I didn't have to swing a bat. I wrote the rule book. They pulled me out and didn't check what was wired to the foundation. That's the thing about contracts. They're boring right up until the moment they're not. The email landed in Karen's inbox at 6:17 a.m. Subject: Urgent. Termination notices. Greenscape. Aquapure. SecureGuard. The kind of message that makes grown HOA presidents spill their oat milk latte before the first patrol. Inside, no fluff, just the facts. All 3 vendors invoking contractual rights under the continuity clause, citing involuntary removal of the named key liaison. Translation: You pulled the wrong lever, Karen, and now your entire neighborhood infrastructure is evaporating. By 7:45, the board chair, Alan Dorsey, was looped in from his golf course retirement fantasy. Gray polo. Gray soul. The man who built his reputation on PowerPoint slides and louder voices at meetings. He called an emergency Zoom at 8:30. Board members. Legal counsel. Treasurer. Karen. I wasn't there. Obviously. I didn't have to be. I still had eyes everywhere. People loyal to the neighborhood. Not to Karen's ego. One of them sat muted on that call, texting me word for word as the meltdown unfolded. Alan's voice, already tight, explained to me how 3 of our largest service contracts are walking without even negotiating. Legal tried to soften it. They're citing the key liaison continuity clause. Section 7D specifically. He paused. Who wrote that clause? Mara Ellison requested it during the last renewal cycle. Client-side counsel included it. Alan's voice dropped half an octave. And we signed that. Karen tried to jump in. It was standard boilerplate. Legal cut her off cold. Standard clauses don't void $87,000 in annual services overnight. The treasurer spoke next. Voice quiet like he was trying not to set off the fire alarm that had already detonated. That's $87,000 gone. Plus penalties for early termination. Silence thick enough to choke on. Then Alan asked the question I'd been waiting to hear since the moment Karen slid that denial paper across the table. Who authorized a removal? Karen cleared her throat. It was a board decision. You are the board, Alan said. Voice flat as fresh concrete. And you just burned a decade of vendor relationships without reading the fine print. Another pause. Bring her back. Karen blurted. Legal coughed. We tried. She's already the designated liaison for 3 other associations. They have her locked in. Cue the visible shake. My contact said Alan's hand was trembling as he tapped his pen against the desk, staring at the contract PDF like it had personally betrayed him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You built this neighborhood's entire service infrastructure on her name and then pulled her name off the deed. He ended the call before Karen could start her damage control script. As for me, I was on a quiet morning walk around the block, sipping coffee with oat milk, reviewing a proposal from the gated community down the road that had heard I was the one who kept neighborhoods from collapsing. I didn't smile exactly. It wasn't joy. It was closure. They had built their little kingdom on my labor, my relationships, my clauses. And when they decided I wasn't good enough to lead it, they detonated the foundation themselves. I just walked away. They were the ones who forgot the clause. By the time the 3rd voicemail came in from Karen's number, my phone had already routed it straight to trash. She left messages, each more frantic than the last. Mara, we need to talk. Just 5 minutes. Hey, listen, I think there's been some misunderstanding. Can we clear the air? I know we had our differences, but this isn't how we fix things. Be the bigger person. That last one almost made me laugh out loud in the middle of the sidewalk. Be the bigger person. I have been the bigger person for 10 years. Bigger than her ego, her tape measure tyranny, her insecurity that made her measure every blade of grass like it was a personal insult. I'd patched every crack she created, taken the blame for every vendor walkout, smiled through every public shaming at the annual meeting. I didn't need 5 minutes with her. I needed distance. And I finally had it. By Thursday, the board emailed. Polite but desperate. We'd like to schedule a professional discussion regarding your recent departure and the implications of the key liaison clauses associated with prior contracts. We believe an open dialogue could be mutually beneficial. Mutually beneficial. I forwarded the message to my new assistant and gave her one line to reply. Please refer all inquiries to legal. That was it. Sent from a new email signature with my new title, Community Liaison. Multiple associations. I didn't hear back. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just static. The kind that settles after the last bomb drops and there's no one left to shoot at. Meanwhile, I was building. My volunteers were thriving. Lisa had already onboarded 2 new associations and was training them on vendor negotiation like she'd invented the process. Mike closed a mid-tier security contract in under 30 minutes without me in the room. I sat back, watched the playback, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride without the side of dread. No politics, no sabotage, no fear that Karen would undercut us for clout at the next meeting. We had real momentum. Our service metrics were the fastest in the region. Neighbor satisfaction numbers most HOAs only dreamed about. And the culture? You could feel in the group chats. Respect without fear. Ambition without blood sport. The boardroom at the community center was glass-walled and sterile. The kind of room meant to look powerful, but couldn't hide the smell of panic sweat when real money was on the line. They'd gathered in full crisis mode. Coffee gone cold, sleeves rolled up, jackets off, one chair conspicuously empty. Karen's lead counsel read the clause again, slowly this time, as if syllables might magically undo $87,000. Key Community Liaison, Mara Ellison. Clause 7D. Agreement void upon involuntary disassociation. Silence. No coughing. No nervous pen tapping. Just the weight of 7 little words snapping the spine of the empire they thought was untouchable. Clause 7D didn't care about intent. Didn't care about board votes, petty fines, or Karen's Instagram-worthy enforcement photos. It cared about names. And my name had been ripped from every contract by the same woman who decided I wasn't a good fit for leadership. Alan finally broke the quiet. He turned to legal, voice flat as a dead lawnmower. We've lost Greenscape, Aquapure, and Secure Guard. Counsel nodded once. All 3 have invoked termination. No room for arbitration. Their lawyers already cited precedent. The treasurer dropped his pen. That's $132,000 in annual recurring services, plus early termination penalties. Alan didn't react. He just looked at the empty chair. Then he stood, walked to the window like he needed the view of dying lawns to breathe, and muttered, "Get her in here." Karen was summoned. She entered 5 minutes later, stiff-necked and already sweating through her pastel blouse. Alan didn't raise his voice. You denied her reappointment. You forced her out. Karen tried the usual. There were strategic considerations. She was becoming too central, too vendor-dependent. We needed flexibility in the org chart. Alan turned around slow. You just gave up our strongest service agreements for flexibility. Karen's mouth moved like she had more to say, but nothing came out. You're done, Alan said. Effective immediately. Security, if you could call the retired cop who usually just waved at cars, was already waiting outside. She didn't argue. What did she say? The paper was already signed. The bridge already ash. While they were rearranging deck chairs on the sinking ship, I was finishing a quarterly forecast review across town. Our new service numbers were blowing past projections. Lisa had just confirmed our onboarding for the gated community would wrap 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Mike was fielding interest from 2 more neighborhoods, asking if we had capacity. At 4:03 p.m., my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. A single text. You win. No name. But I knew. I stared at it for a second, then typed exactly what needed saying. I didn't play. You removed your queen on purpose. And that was it. No parades. No dramatic monologue. Just a clean board. A new team and a future no longer built on asking permission from a woman who measured loyalty with a tape measure. Some people chase power with vests and clipboards. Me? I wrote my name into the walls of the neighborhood. They tore me out like I was replaceable. Turns out some names are load-bearing. But the real show wasn't over yet. The next morning, the neighborhood woke up to reality. Greenscape's crews didn't show. The lawns, which Karen had spent years fining people for being 0.2 inches too long, were already starting to look like a savanna. Aquapure shut the pool gates with a bright orange sign. Service discontinued pending new contract. Kids stood outside, crying in their swimsuits while parents stared at their phones in disbelief. Secure Guard canceled the gate access codes. Residents who'd paid their dues for 24/7 security suddenly couldn't even get pizza delivered without manual approval. The irony was thicker than the overgrown grass. Karen's sacred rules, the ones she'd enforced with religious zeal, were now impossible to follow because there was no one left to maintain them. Neighbors started posting in the group chat. Why is the pool closed? Who's mowing this week? My security app isn't working. Karen tried one last desperate post. Temporary transition period. Please remain calm and compliant. The replies were brutal. Compliant with what? Karen? The dandelions? Maybe if you hadn't chased off the only person who actually kept things running, we wouldn't be here. The comments rolled in like a tsunami. Even the quiet ones who never spoke up were done. I watched it all from my new office across town. Sipping coffee. No gloating. Just the quiet satisfaction of watching a house of cards built on ego finally collapse. Karen called an emergency town hall that evening. Attendance was mandatory, she said in the email, or face fines. 27 people showed up anyway, mostly to watch the show. She stood at the front in her vest, clipboard trembling, trying to explain vendor transition challenges. The first question came from Mike. So, the clause that kept everything running for 10 years. The one you personally removed Mara from. That's the problem. The room went dead silent. Karen's face turned the color of her overpriced lipstick. She stuttered something about board discretion and greater good. Greater good. That woman really believed her ego was the neighborhood's greatest asset. The second question came from Lisa. How much are the new contract going to cost us now that we have to renegotiate everything from scratch? Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The treasurer stood up in the back and quietly read the numbers. 132,000 plus penalties. New bids already 30% higher. The room erupted. Not angry yelling. Cold, disappointed silence followed by people standing up and walking out. One by one. No drama. Just footsteps. The same quiet footsteps that had started this whole thing months ago. Karen tried one last Hail Mary the next morning. She showed up at my door unannounced. Still in the HOA vest like it gave her superpowers. Holding a manila folder like a peace offering. Mara, please. We can fix this. The board is willing to reinstate you with full authority. We'll even create a new title. Senior liaison. Whatever you want. I stood in my doorway in yoga pants and a coffee mug, looking at the woman who had spent 10 years making my life a checklist of violations. I didn't invite her in. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, calm as the summer evening. You built the house on my name and then pulled my name off the deed. Now you want me to come back and hold it up while you keep measuring grass. She blinked. For the first time in 10 years, Karen Hargrove had no script, no rule to hide behind, no fine to threaten, just the naked truth staring back at her in broad daylight. She left without another word. The folder stayed on my welcome mat like the sad little surrender flag it was. 2 days later, the board held the special election everyone knew was coming. Karen didn't even show up. The vote was unanimous. New president. New board, new bylaws that quietly removed the ridiculous tape measure clauses and added one simple line. All vendor agreements must include continuity protections for designated liaisons. My name wasn't mentioned. It didn't need to be. The neighborhood already knew. The first thing the new board did was rehire Greenscape, Aquapure, and Secure Guard at the original rates. No penalties. No drama. Just a quiet email from the new president. Thank you for your patience. We look forward to working with the original team. The lawns were mowed by Friday. The pool reopened with a big banner that read, Welcome back. Neighbors. Kids cannonballed in like nothing had happened. And the security gates worked again without a single sarcastic comment. I didn't go back to any official role. I didn't need to. My new liaisons across 3 associations kept me busy enough. And the satisfaction of watching whispering pines finally breathe without a tyrant measuring every blade of grass was payment enough. Neighbors started stopping me at the mailbox again, but this time the whispers were different. Thank you. We see what you did. The place actually feels like a neighborhood now. Even the old guy on Elm Street gave me 2 thumbs up. Karen sold her house 3 months later. The listing photos showed the same perfect lawn she'd spent years obsessing over. But the for sale sign looked like a white flag. She moved to a condo downtown where nobody cares about grass height. Last I heard, she was posting on Facebook about finally having freedom from petty rules. The irony wrote itself. As for me, I sat on my porch the first night the pool lights came back on, listening to kids laughing in the water, watching fireflies dance over lawns that finally looked lived in instead of inspected. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. I felt balanced. They had built their little kingdom on my labor, my relationships, my clauses. When they decided I wasn't good enough, they detonated the foundation themselves. I just walked away. The contracts did the rest. Some people chase power with vests and clipboards. Me? I wrote my name into the walls. They tore me out like I was replaceable. Turns out some names are load-bearing. And when those names leave, the whole house comes down. One perfectly manicured blade of grass at a time. And if you're still here after 5,000 words of pure HOA Karen justice, you're not one of 97%. You're the reason these stories keep getting told. Hit subscribe. Drop a like if you're cheering for the quiet ones who finally win. And I'll see you in the next neighborhood disaster. Because trust me, there's always another Karen measuring something she shouldn't. Stay patient. Stay dangerous. And never, ever let them remove your name from the deed.